Phase of this is that the two topics that most often cause friction and problems in marriages are money and sex.
Yep.
Does the Great Recession hit us in late 2008, 2009? Are household finances and issues like that driving more of the tensions now, or is it just kind of it's a smorgasbord of problems from when you first started doing this to then? Are there any kind of trends in marriage you can sense in your work in this area?
I don't know. I think that money is always a pressure on relationships, on marriages, and I don't know that. Well, certainly, I think the recession made it worse for a lot of families. I think it made the situation more acute. But I think the finances are always going to be an issue because people have different priorities. Even within in a marriage, a husband and wife may have different priorities about where the money is going to be spent. And what you find a lot of times is that you have two different kinds of spenders. You have one person who spends impulsively and the other person who has to plan every bit of spending out, and that causes conflict. I mean, that's sort of our marriage too. I'm the impulsive one, and so and that's caused issues. I'm better at that now. I plan it better, and but I mean, that caused some conflict, especially earlier on when I wasn't making a whole lot of money.
Well, do you find the same things that bring us together often make us fight as well?
Yes. People get attracted by the differences, and then they get surprised when the differences are actually the issue. And but I think that it's a process of appreciating and adapting. And a lot of times, this it's almost a cliche. In fact, I think it is a cliche. But basically, all of these things come down to communication. I think that if you take two reasonable people who are committed to the Christian framework of marriage, in my religion, we would call it a sacrament of marriage. You would find that if they were given the right communication skills, almost all of them can probably work out their problems to a level where they could be satisfied and live with it. I mean, not everything gets solved. I mean, there are some issues that are just, where the marriage is just doomed from the start because people went into it with the wrong ideas of who they were marrying. But I mean, putting aside,
right, obviously you've got abusive situations and bad situations and fraudulent situations,
exactly,
and things like that. But
putting aside those things, if you have two people of reasonable goodwill and reasonable and reasonable commitment to the Christian framework of marriage, I think if you solve the communication problems, you would have happy marriages. And that's what.
So
and that's
how
what
do we talk to each other better? Other than taking diaries, what other advice do you have for our listeners?
Well, what we stress in Marriage Encounter is to focus on feelings rather than. I'm trying to think of how we put this, but basically is how do things make me feel rather than how do what it is that you did to create that feeling. So, if you're staying up all night playing on the computer, it makes me feel as though I am not as prioritized in your life. It makes me feel like that there is less love there for me than there is for whatever it is that you're doing on the computer. I mean, that would be one way that we would try to process, rather than saying you're on the computer all the time, you ignore me, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, because that is sort of an accusatory mode that automatically will kick in defenses. Well, I work, this is my job, blah 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 blah, and rather than do that, focusing on how something makes you feel allows your partner to understand what the impact of that is. Even though they're maybe defensible, there has to be some ways to make adjustments to deal with the legitimate feelings of each other. And one thing that we do stress is that feelings are never right or wrong; they just are, and they have to be dealt with.
And I think that's something I totally agree with you on. That's something that just in general with relationships, whether it be a romantic one or otherwise, feelings just are what they are.
Right, and they have to be dealt with. And at some point, at some level, of course, in some relationships, they're just going to have to percolate where they're at because there isn't any really great solution to that. But in a marriage, it's a lot different. I mean, you're both occupying the same space, and it has to be a mutual, complementary relationship within that, because it's a different sort of thing than it is with, say, your boss. That's not a complementary relationship. That's a hierarchical relationship, and your boss is going to tell you what to do. Now, there's dysfunctions that can be brought into that can be resolved, but in the end, your boss exists to tell you what to do, and you exist to do what your boss tells you to do. Well, that's not a marriage. That's a very different sort of relationship. It's
Yes.
with your siblings. It's a very different kind of relationship.
Right.
You're not occupying the same space, and you're not really supposed to be complementary. You are just different people. In a marriage, you have to be complementary, and the way marriages survive and thrive is by recognizing the complementarity of marriage and building off of that. So you can't as a husband or a wife, you can't make your spouse the identical of you. That's probably not why you got married in the first place. And it's just unrealistic. And so it requires constant adaptation.
Well,
that's what we try to do.
Our guest, Ed Morrissey, is proving so complimentary. We're going to keep him on for the next section. So you are listening to The Jim and Mickey Show. Keep it right here.
It certainly is a big bun. It's a very big bun. Big, fluffy bun. It's a very big, fluffy bun. Where's the beef?
Some hamburger places give you a lot less beef on a lot of bun.
Where's the beef?
At Wendy's, we serve a hamburger we modestly call a single. And Wendy's single has more beef than the Whopper or Big Mac. At Wendy's, you get more beef and less bun.
Hey, where's the beef? I don't think there's anybody back there.
You want something better. You're Wendy's kind of people.
Now, back to the Jim and Mickey Show.
Welcome back to the Jim and Mickey Show. I am Jim Geraghty, joined by Mickey White, and we are joined by a very special guest, Ed Morrissey, discussing his work with his marriage encounter groups. And I actually kind of an interesting question for Ed. I kind of had read this in a couple different magazine articles and such. The idea that one of the challenges for marriages today is that people come in with unrealistic expectations. And the sense that our spouses have now become our best friends, our lovers, our financial partners, our co-parents, and that they really have become the one-person support network. And that maybe people need more than one person in a support network of their lives. Are you seeing that in the couples you're working with, or is that kind of an overstated phenomenon?
I think that there's something to that. I would argue, though, that what may be more of an issue these days is the fact that people are getting too much involvement in terms of support from outside sources, and it's really easy to do now with social media and that sort of thing. I think it puts a lot of pressure on a relationship when you have more than two people in a marriage, and I think that what you find, and I mean, this is not a new problem. I mean, you've had people who allow family members to intrude on the marriage relationship, and I'm not talking about the kids. I'm talking about in-laws, friends, outside pressures, and I actually think that part of the issue that we see is that sometimes people are turning outside the marriage for that kind of support when they really should be turning inside the marriage for support and intimacy, not just in terms of sexual infidelity. I'm just talking about in terms of intimacy of a different kind, confidant type of things, and that can be real destructive. And so, I actually think that you can be too insular as a couple. I mean, it's certainly possible to be that way, but I think the bigger danger is the other direction.
Interesting. I was going to say, in that insular scenario, the problem is if you're fighting with your spouse, well, you're not just fighting with your spouse, you're fighting with your best friend, your co-parent,
right,
your lover, all these, it was your whole world has just been blown to pieces by, whatever you're fighting at the moment.
Here's the thing, and I'm going to throw this out, and it's one of those things that I don't know. My views of marriage are so messed up that really people should not look at me as a role model in any way, shape, or form, because my role models were so messed up. However, having said that, one of the things that irritates me, actually, Ed, is when people talk about marrying their best friend, because I have a best friend. and it's not the person that I wanted to marry, nor is it. She's wonderful and I love her. But I think there's a need for, like, I understand what you're saying about supplemental outside the marriage, but at the same time, isn't there a need to have, I'm a big fan of The Prophet, had it read at my wedding actually, about, the two trees that don't grow in each other's shadow kind of thing.
Well, I have a best friend outside of my marriage. I don't want to marry him either, although he does live 11 doors down from me, which is a really long story.
Okay,
we grew up in high school together, and we both moved to Minnesota from Southern California. We're on the same street 11 doors down from each other.
Oh, wow.
But that's a story for a different podcast, I think. But I think as your marriage goes along, this is the person you're going to be the most intimate with, and whether or not you call them your best friend or not, this is the person who shares your life in a way that nobody else is going to share your life. And it's great to have friends. It's great to be in community. I think it's always better when couples have friends that they share in together rather than apart. But and my friend is close friends with my wife as well. I mean, we're all friends, but yeah, I think that when you're in the relationship, even if you're not saying, well, this is my best friend, my lover, my co-parent, whatever you want to say, this is my spouse. That's the closest relationship you're going to have. And if it's not the closest relationship that you've got, then I think you've got an issue, and it's going to wind up being a problem. That's one of the symptoms I think that you'll see in spiritual divorce, where people are already starting to kind of check out of the marriage on the way out.
Interesting. Well, Ed, I cannot thank you enough for both getting up early to join us this morning and for being here and being our honored third guest. We really do appreciate it. And I know that I know that our listeners are going to be thrilled to know about this side of you. Jim?
Yeah, I was going to say, Ed, is there any webs? If people are in your area and either feel the need for this or want to know more about it, is there a website they should visit? Any particular information they should go to?
Yeah, it's marriages.org, which is the Twin Cities Marriage Encounter. Now, if you're not in, if you're not in the Twin Cities, there are marriage encounters. There are marriage encounter organizations all over the country. There's actually two different versions of marriage encounter. There's what's called national and worldwide. We're part of the national marriage encounter, which is the non-denominational marriage encounter. Oddly enough, the other one, the worldwide, is the Catholic version of it. Now, we're Catholics, but we ended up in national. But those you can usually find through Catholic parishes in your community.
Okay, Ed, and in 30 seconds, how do you save your relationship?
Communicate better. Listen to your...
Ooh, that was even good. That was like
listen to
words.
your spouse. Listen to your spouses. Work on feelings. Don't work on accusations. And try out the marriage encounter process if you get a chance. It's a huge benefit. I think it's a great tune-up, if nothing else.
Well, thank you again, and we do hope to have you back on the show some other time. But thanks again for coming on the show, Ed. And coming up, we're going to be talking about some other things moving forward into this Valentine's Day season, including some advice that some of our listeners have gotten over the years. I'm Mickey White. He's Jim Geraghty. We were just talking with Ed Morrissey, and this is the Jim and Mickey Show. We'll be right back.
It starts here with a lightly toasted bun, and then a pure beef hamburger, sizzling hot, a slice of cheddar blend cheese, and some crisp, fresh lettuce. Then, our own secret sauce. The club slice, toasted. Another hamburger, and a little more sauce just for good flavor. Crisp dill pickles, and the sesame seed crown. This is the sandwich. McDonald's new Big Mac sandwich for the bigger-than-average appetite. McDonald's is your kind of place.
Now, back to the Jim and Mickey Show.
Welcome back. I'm Mickey White. He's Jim Geraghty, and you're listening to The Jim and Mickey Show. We have been asking our listeners all week to send and share with us some of the best love advice that they have gotten. After that last segment with Ed Morrissey, which was absolutely epic, Jim, I'm looking forward to sharing what some of our listeners gave us as well.
I was going to say, did you launch it by kind of offering any of your own, or